Good evening. This is Daryl Terrell from Daryl Terrell Times on Facebook. I want to talk to you tonight about doing big things and raising our community's aspirations and giving you a reason to hope again in our community's future. I would like to start with a story. On a cold, wintry day on January 20th, 1961, Inauguration Day, our nation had awakened that morning, feeling young and full of energy again as the crowd bundled up, making their way through the snow-covered streets full of expectations. Its mood brightened by the promise of a new decade of hope and a new can-do spirit in our nation's capital. President Kennedy represented a new generation of leadership, one with fresh ideas and not beholden to a stagnant past. Just 1,355 words, he asked his generation to come along with him on a journey in being part of something much larger than themselves and much greater than they were capable of imagining. But the real magic was yet to come. 5 months later, on May 25th, 1961, President Kennedy captured our nation's imagination in summoning our nation to greatness in a rendezvous with destiny in an address to a joint session of Congress. He said, "I believed that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him home safely to Earth. In a very real sense," he said, "it will not be one man going to the moon. It will be an entire nation, for all of us must work to put him there." 8 years later, President Kennedy's soaring vision came to life on July 20th, 1969, as a 500 million people watched on television as Neil Armstrong placed the first human foot on another world while uttering these famous words: "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." 4 days later, on July 24th, more than 200,000 miles from Earth, Apollo 11 splashed down safely in the Pacific Ocean. That splash embodied what he had said in 1960, that Woodrow Wilson once said: "The success of a party means little unless it's being used by a nation for a great purpose." That great purpose, he said, is to provide leadership, to set before the American people the unfinished business of our generation. When you come to think about it, on a larger scale, our mission to the moon was that great purpose he spoke eloquently about in moving our country forward. It was about what we can do together when we dream beyond our limitations for something better. Let's look at the global landscape in 1961. The spring of 1961 was a time of uncertainty and insecurity in America and around the world. The Soviets had beaten us to space 4 years earlier with Sputnik. Wars of liberation were being waged around the globe. At home, a civil war in the South and across this country was pulling our country apart at the seams. In this volatile America, this tinderbox of a world, President Kennedy found moments like this not in despair, but hope. President Kennedy was determined to bring our country together, providing the leadership and vision needed to do the big things in raising our nation's aspirations and moving our country forward. That's what leadership is about. It's having the faith in doing big things that seem impossible when the odds are stacked against you. President Kennedy setting our nation's sights on the moon by any imagination was a big thing at the moment in history. By many expert standards, it was a crazy idea. We didn't have a plan for a rocket. The science wasn't there either. NASA hadn't even flown an astronaut around into orbit. We were in the planning stage of John Glenn's mission to orbit around the Earth. But President Kennedy understood that. He knew the challenges ahead. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't tell us that the goal of going to the moon could be accomplished without anything less than hard work, unity, years of commitment, and sacrifice, which we had. He said then at Rice University in 1962, we choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they were easy, but because they were hard. This was such a bold, daring, confident statement. It was, if he said, an act of faith and vision. Faith in the idea that would have seemed madness only a few years before, and probably too many seemed like madness at that time. He knew what we as a nation was up against. But what he understood, and the NASA engineers underestimated, was the human spirit that dwells within inside all of us, in the greatness that exists in everyone. It was that spirit that defeated a great empire, saved the continent from oppression, and overcame a Great Depression. That's what they failed to see. They knew about numbers and equations and science, but President Kennedy knew the character of the people he led. Our resilience, our fearlessness, our can-do spirit, and our ability to defy the odds. But he knew something else. He knew that we as a people can do big things. We can reach great heights. We can rise to any challenges if we work together for a common purpose. However, the world is much different than it was in 1961. We face more complex challenges today. None of them will be easily overcome. We have a broken immigration system. Our infrastructure is falling apart. We have a Social Security and Medicare system on which millions of our people depend on, and yet it's reaching towards bankruptcy and driving future deficits to trillions of dollars a year. Our middle-class families are struggling to get by as the cost continues to go up for everything from health care to college tuition to groceries to gas. Their incomes aren't going up with those prices. We have a healthcare system that is broken, with costs on the rise and coverage harder and harder to come by. Our community is becoming a magnet for chronic poverty and attracting industries with jobs that pay low wages and no path into the middle class. Many of our people are trapped in low-wage, dead-end jobs with no economic mobility, unprepared to compete for the sustainable jobs in which the growth sectors of our economy. But these challenges are not a cause for pessimism. Medicare, we are not helpless in the face of them. They are not a reason to throw our hands up and give driving future deficits of trillions of dollars a year. This should serve as our middle class families for hard work are struggling to get by as the cost continues to go up for everything from health care to college tuition to groceries to gas. Their incomes aren't going up as fast as those prices. We have a healthcare system that is broken, with costs on the rise and coverage harder and harder to come by. Our community is becoming a magnet for chronic poverty and attracting industries with jobs that pay low wages and no path into the middle class. Many of our people are trapped in low-wage, dead-end jobs with no economic mobility, unprepared to compete for the jobs in the high-growth sectors of our economy. When I mean jobs, I mean sustainable jobs. But these challenges are not a cause for pessimism. We are not helpless in the face of them. They are not a reason to throw your hands up and just give up. Instead, this should serve as an inspiration for hard work, for unity of purpose, for boldness, for more than a little bit of faith and that can-do spirit. We can do better. We can turn it around in our own communities. The challenges are real, but so are the possibilities of great success. We cannot forget President Kennedy showed us what is possible if we have that can-do spirit and the courage to look over the horizon for a brighter tomorrow. He showed us that it will take leadership and people coming together, rolling up their sleeves and meeting these challenges and moving us forward to a new frontier. It is that unity, leadership, and that can-do spirit that has been lacking in our own community. The willingness to take on the hard things when the odds are stacked against you, when the evidence don't measure out, and to take them on directly and honestly and bring people together for a common purpose. Just a day before President Kennedy's death, he compared our mission to the moon to a boy who comes upon a wall in the orchard. The wall is tall. It looks insurmountable. But that boy is curious about what lies on the other side of that wall. So he throws his cap over the wall, and then he has no choice but to go after it. Apollo 11, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins made that climb. They realized that the dreams of a nation, they fulfilled an American destiny. They taught us that nothing is impossible if we set our sights high enough, like President Kennedy did. Because when you look at the word impossible, it says, I'm possible. That's what leadership is all about. It's choosing to do the hard things, to accept the challenges of our time, to fight for the goals that may seem impossible, and to bring people together to see them accomplished. That's what President Kennedy did. His promise was fulfilled. But our journey as a community has not been completed. We have it in our power to raise our community's aspiration, contrary what the evidence shows, and giving our people, and I mean you, a real reason to hope again. What is your community and my community's moonshot? In my community, it's building a road out of poverty into the middle class and building a bridge to the American dream for all our people. We have the resources, but we lack the vision, that can-do spirit, and that leadership that can bring our community together in building ladders of economic opportunity for all our people to climb. Our community works better with a strong middle class, with real opportunity for our people to work themselves into. Building that bridge is not only about a path out of poverty, it's about giving our people a real reason to hope again, that the American dream is for them too. It's about our ability to do big things and conquering what for some seem impossible, and creating a path out of poverty into the middle class for all of our people. Building the bridge would send a message to our kids that they will grow up in exciting times without limits, times that demand their imagination, their vision, their courage, times that will reward them for believing in themselves and their community's possibilities. We can get there because it is in our power. We are one people in one community. That's why I want that little girl in my community, and even in your own community, who someday cracks the code of cancer, to be a part of our schools. I want that little boy who invents that clean fuel to heat our homes and our power, our economy, to be a native son. I want our kids' dreams of tomorrow to eclipse even our greatest hopes of today. In closing, I would like to talk to you about a way forward in meeting our community's challenges and moving our community to a higher horizon beyond our imagination. In the last moments of President Kennedy's acceptance speech in 1960, he said, "Today our concern must be with the future, for the world is changing. The old era is ending. The old ways will not do." He atoned, "The new frontier is here, whether we like it or not." Then he talked about the new frontier as the uncharted areas of science and space, unsolved problems of peace and war, unconquered pockets of ignorance and prejudice, and unanswered questions about poverty and surplus. He said that it would be easy for us to be afraid and to shrink from those challenges. Our responsibilities in meeting them and just accept the way things are or accept the status quo. My friends, we can do better. He said we must meet them with courage, vigorous leadership, new innovation, and that with that can-do spirit that has defined our country. As he said, we have to believe in ourselves and our abilities, that we can do better, that we can set our sights for our community even higher. My friends, we cannot be afraid what lies over that wall, that what President Kennedy talked about. It's time to look to the next horizon. Hope is there. The sun is rising. That's why I truly believe our community, as President Kennedy and President Franklin Roosevelt generation did, has a rendezvous with destiny. I would like to end my remarks with an inspirational quote. This sums up what I've been sharing with you, by Harriet Tubman, who once said, "Every great dream begins with a dreamer." Always remember, you have within inside yourself the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach the stars and change the world. That's what President Kennedy did. And I believe that's what we all can do. That's what we can do as one community and one people, and for a common purpose in building a community where the American dream soars for everyone. I want to thank you for listening. Until we meet again, always remember, even in our darkest moments, hope shines the brightest. Our best days are yet to come. This is Daryl Terrell from Daryl Terrell Times on Facebook. I want to God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you and good night.